The years between 2000 and 2005 marked one of the most defining turning points in modern American history. As the United States entered the 21st century, it faced political uncertainty, economic change, and global events that would permanently reshape the nation's priorities and identity. At the dawn of the new millennium, the United States was still enjoying the afterglow of the economic expansion of the 1990s. Technology, companies had grown rapidly, the internet was becoming mainstream, and many Americans believed the country was entering a new era of prosperity and stability. However, the optimism of the late 1990s quickly gave way to political tension. The presidential election of 2000 between George W. Bush and Al Gore became one of the closest and most controversial elections in American history. Disputes over ballot counting in Florida led 2 weeks of legal challenges and national uncertainty. In December 2000, the Supreme Court issued its decision in Bush v. Gore, effectively ending the recount and awarding Florida's electoral vote to George W. Bush. Bush assumed the presidency amid deep political division, with many Americans questioning the fairness of the electoral process. This moment revealed how polarized the nation had become, even before the major crises that lay ahead. Soon after, the American economy began to slow. The dot-com bubble burst in 2000 and 2001. Causing the collapse of many technology companies that had been built on speculation rather than sustainable profits. Stock markets declined, unemployment rose, and thousands of workers lost their jobs, especially in the tech sector. Despite these setbacks, digital technology continued to expand. Email, online shopping, and early social media platforms became increasingly common. The internet was no longer a novelty. It was becoming an essential part of American life. Everything changed on the morning of September 11, 2001. 19 terrorists affiliated with Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 commercial airplanes. 2 were flown into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. 1 struck the Pentagon, and a 4th crashed in Pennsylvania after passengers attempted to regain control. Nearly 3,000 people were killed. The attacks shocked the nation and the world, shattering the sense of security many Americans had taken for granted. But for the first time since World War II, the United States had been attacked on its own soil on such a massive scale. In the days that followed, the country came together in grief and unity. President George W. Bush declared a global war on terror, stating that the United States would pursue not only the terrorists responsible, but also those who harbored them. In October 2001, U.S. forces, along with allied nations, invaded Afghanistan. The goal was to dismantle Al-Qaeda and remove the Taliban government that had provided sanctuary to its leaders. The Taliban regime collapsed quickly, but the conflict did not end. What followed would become America's longest war. At home, national security became the dominant concern. In 2002, the Department of Homeland Security was created to coordinate efforts to prevent future attacks. The USA Patriot Act expanded the government's surveillance and law enforcement powers, allowing authorities to monitor communications and financial activities linked to suspected terrorism. These measures were supported by many Americans who prioritized safety, but they also sparked debate. Civil liberties groups raised concerns about privacy, government overreach, and the balance between freedom and security debates that continue to this day. By 2003, American foreign policy took another dramatic turn. The Bush administration argued that Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction and posed a threat to global stability. Despite opposition from some allies and the absence of clear evidence, the United States led a coalition to invade Iraq in March 2003. The initial military campaign was swift. Baghdad fell within weeks, and Saddam Hussein's government collapsed. However, the aftermath proved far more complex and costly than expected. An insurgency emerged, sectarian violence increased, and American troops became embroiled in a prolonged occupation. As casualties mounted and weapons of mass destruction were not found, public support for the war began to decline. The Iraq War became one of the most controversial chapters in modern U.S. history. Meanwhile, American society continued to change in quieter but lasting ways. Cell phones became more common, digital cameras replaced film, and news increasingly moved online. Cable news and internet forums reshaped political discourse, often intensifying division. In 2004, George W. Bush won re-election against Democratic challenger John Kerry. The election reflected a nation still deeply divided over issues such as national security, the Iraq War, and the role of government. Then, in 2005, disaster struck closer to home. Hurricane Katrina made landfall along the Gulf Coast, devastating New Orleans and surrounding communities. Flooding, delayed evacuations, and slow government response exposed serious failures in disaster preparedness and emergency management. Images of stranded residents and overwhelmed rescue efforts shocked the nation. Qatar. Americans that not all threats came from abroad and raised questions about inequality, infrastructure, and leadership. By the end of 2005, the United States was a profoundly changed country. It was engaged in long-term military conflicts overseas, operating under expanded security laws at home, and navigating a rapidly evolving digital world. The period from 2000 to 2005 marked the end of post-Cold War optimism and the beginning of a new era defined by global uncertainty, security concerns, and political polarization. The decisions made during these years would shape American policy, society, and identity well into the 21st century. This was a time when the United States confronted its vulnerabilities, redefined its role on the world stage, and entered an age where the consequences of globalization and technology became impossible to ignore.